Hello and welcome to The Wise Why. This morning I am joined by Lee Vanstone. I hope I said that correctly. Lee and I have met over the last year, 2 years at networking events, and it's been really interesting for me to see somebody following the path that I was on 3 years ago, and I'm now into my 4th year, and Lee is still growing, and it's just awesome. And I can't speak this morning. I hope that helps you, Lee. So as usual, the show is not about me. It is about my guest. That was me trying to ad-lib there. I will go straight over to Lee. Lee, please introduce yourself.
Hi, so I'm Lee from Lee Vanstone Web Development. I'm a WordPress specialist and I help businesses to find their audience, help them align with their needs of the business and help them think about their long-term growth plans for their website. So thinking beyond the launch as well as thinking about the launch itself.
And I love that about you. You do something that's quite unique. You don't work with templates. Could you expand a little bit more on that for people? Because every business out there knows that they need a website. I constantly tell people that your website is your department store, your socials are your shop front window, all of these different things. But without a website, you really don't have a presence. Could you explain your real point of difference here?
Yeah, absolutely. So from the way I build the websites is every business has their own unique marketing challenge. So with a website that I code from scratch, it gives you more flexibility to develop and you're less boundaries to what you can offer. My whole philosophy is that with websites, I want to try and save people time. SEO brings people to the traffic to the website. My job is to help improve engagement on the website when people are there. So if I can save people time, I particularly work with a lot of volunteer businesses and volunteer organisations. And for them, it's about trying to make them more productive. So I can build functionality within the website that can be matched to their exact needs, but also can be adapted over time. So as they grow, we can adapt and add things to it. So you're no longer kind of beholden to long subscriptions. We can actually build something bespoke to you. So that's the kind of position I go with. We're moving away from templates. You're kind of removing those parameters. There's no kind of limit to what you can do. So if you need to integrate it with third-party systems, then you can do that as well. So that's the kind of approach I do with.
Yeah, no, I just want to touch on that for a little minute, Lee, about where you are when you launch your business. I mean, we all know you start kind of with a very basic website. You start with 1 or 2 pages and a contact page. But actually, if you were to look at my website now, I think there's probably over 200 pages on there. I don't know without looking. So I wondered if you could expand a little bit more about building a website for today, but future-proofing yourself and the way that you do it with code for the real future.
Yeah, absolutely. So from when I start with any project, it's really trying to find out the fundamentals of what you're trying to answer from the website itself. So I think really getting to understand the structure of the website is important, kind of before you even jump in and think about how it's going to look. So I will sit down with clients and actually ask them about what are the motivations for people coming to your website in the first place? Is it they want to buy a product from you? Is it they want to buy a service? Are they looking to book an appointment? We'll find that information out from kind of having a consultation together. We'll really get to kind of understand what they're looking for. During that process, I'll also ask them about their long-term growth plans. So whether that's to increase by having new locations or they can add more courses in the future. Because what I want to do is I want to give people the autonomy of their own websites to grow. I will be there to help support them as and when they need to. There's short-term resources and time into themselves, but I want to be able to empower businesses to be able to look after websites on their own as well. So quite commonly, people want to be able to load blog posts or add new courses. I want to be able to give people the power to do that because I'm on my website quite often, but for many people, they're not on their website for up to a couple of months. So actually making sure that the front of the website is as easy as the back end is very important to me. That's what I try and offer with my business.
And can we just talk about this? Because a lot of people think you build a website, you put in some code, some special software to improve your SEO, you put other software in to keep it safe. But actually, it's a lot more complicated than that, isn't it? I wonder if you could explain about the service and the aftercare that you do.
Yeah. So with WordPress or any other platform, Drupal, um, there are updates that are needed. So over time, technology is evolving all the time. There are security patches and new features that are added all the time. So as a website owner, it's important that you keep on top of it. So with now more and more threats of cyber attacks and things like that, it's important that we try and keep on top of it. So as a website supports provider, I help businesses try and remove that overwhelm of trying to look after the website and try and help them with being more accountable with their website. So kind of checking in, doing the updates to kind of keep things ticking over and make sure they are secure, so they are protecting their customers in the long term. And as I mentioned, with future planning as well, it's also thinking about how we can plan for the future. So appreciate with different budgets and things, we need to kind of spread it over a plan. So actually having a idea of how we're going to go from A to B is really important. So that's how I can kind of help in my business, how I can help facilitate it with them and kind of almost try and break it down into smaller chunks, rather than trying to look at the big picture all in one go, because that obviously that can give people a lot of overwhelm. So that's what I try and offer
Awesome.
with my support.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. So, how did you get into web design? Because yeah, I fell into it because I launched a business and I did and I'm not going to say it's a mistake, but like many people, I launched on a shoestring and I started with a template from a site that I would never go and use now. I've now got WordPress and I've got my web designer who is just awesome. But how did you get into web design? How did you find it?
So for me, since I was a child, I've always been a creative person. I've always been a bit frustrated that I've never been great at drawing. But for me, I've always loved kind of exploring ideas and being quite creative. I did a lot of creative writing when I was a lot younger, and I kind of enjoyed that area. But for me, another passion of mine is sort of problem solving. So I've done a lot of back in the day. I've done kind of escape rooms and used to do a lot of puzzles and things like that. And kind of bringing those two passions together when I was kind of trying to think what career I could go into. I did a lot of computers. So for me, it just felt a natural fit to go put with development. I can kind of bridge both worlds really. So I can kind of be creative with the design and how a website's built, but also help people think about ideas they may not have thought about in the past with it as well.
And
So that's kind of how I got into it really. So
yeah,
starting from an agency background, I then moved into it and decided actually I enjoyed having the variety of working with different clients, from cryogenics business to a engineering procurement business to now most recently I've done quite a few charities. I'm able to kind of bridge these gaps with um, building my curiosity and trying to find out what other people's businesses, but also able to help them solve the problem that they're trying to solve with their new website, and try and actually, instead of just kind of investing in the here and now, actually help them continue invest and help it grow so that the website adapts with the growth of their business. That's why I love it.
awesome. Thank you. And so when you start with a project, you start with this very small sort of understanding, but you scale quite significantly. And that's one of the things that I really like about your work is the way that you scale your use of color. I think your use of color is very strong, which is why, I love color. Not that I'm wearing any color today, but I wonder if you could just touch about that kind of design aspect of the website.
Yeah, so from the design point of view, we're solving other problems with um, the kind of functionality, but actually with the design, it's important as a web design business to actually think about the accessibility of how website people interact with websites and the usability. So there's lots of things that as website owners we can do to kind of help improve that. In terms of me as a business, when I'm putting designs together and I'm thinking about how things work, I'm always thinking about actually how different people will interact with it. So when we talk about color, we talk about having good color contrast levels, so it's easy for people to read, especially if you've got a lot of content, you want it to be easier to read. So actually looking at color is really important. Also looking at lengths of content as well. So if you've got quite wide columns on your website, if you give people quite a hefty paragraphs of text, then try and actually look at bringing that down and introducing more headings, because that will make it easier to read and also make it more accessible for everyone, because that's the aim really. With accessibility, it's not a tick box exercise, it's actually trying to make it usable for everyone. Usability is really important, and that's what I try and garner with my websites, is that I want people to come to their website and there aren't any boundaries for people engaging.
And the way we consume content has changed. I mean, this is the thing. Yesterday, I had a problem with my mobile and I had to go into a shop, and it was really interesting because I'm from the generation that didn't grow up with mobile phones. You know, I launched the internet into the consumer marketplace. You know, when I worked for Intel, we launched the Pentium M processor, and we didn't even have wireless cards that went to. I'm not going to try and say the piece. Yes, I am. No, I'm not. But into the wireless card slot. So the world's changed. We are now consuming information so quickly. And I was interested in what you said about the headers. Is that why you've moved to this new way? Because 5 years ago you could write lots of content, but nowadays it's much sharper, much quicker. I wonder if you could expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, so it's more about trying to make things more, because people are quick going on websites and there's less sort of attention span. People want to digest things quickly. So what back many years ago was to have lots of paragraphs of text is no longer enough. So you need to kind of look actually about the layout of text. So whether you can break that with images, or you can look at formatting things differently. So if you've got some listable items, then using bullet points and extra formatting around it will just make things pop on the screen a bit better. And hopefully will help people read it as well. So by having those headings, people naturally can kind of skim through the headings that you've got on the page and quickly find information, because we now want to make sure that you've almost got to handhold people through your website and direct them to the next location, which is why having great call to actions will help guide people to ultimately go to your end goal, which is hopefully either buying a product, inquiring with you, or any other options like that, where whatever your goal is for your website.
Awesome, thank you. So aha moments. I mean, how long have you been trading now?
So it's 2.5 years next month. So yeah, loving it.
So this is a huge journey. I know, because I'm into my fourth year. I can never. I'm dyslexic and dyspraxic, and that means I've got to work out numbers. And it's 9:30 in the morning, or 9:40 in the morning. It's not going to happen. So any aha moments on the way, or moments where you've really learned from something? I know I've had plenty. My first website being one of them. Has there been anything along the way that has really changed the way you deliver your business?
Um, I think for me, the biggest one is really how different people will interact with the projects, and for a lot of people, they actually really want to understand how they can improve the accessible nature of their websites, or they're curious about how things work. And as the background I came from before, I was a senior developer in an agency background where I mentor people, and now I've come into the website development and I train clients after the build as well. I love being able to kind of help mentor and educate people, and when they then go and implement it and then pass on to other people, that's what I get really big buzz off, because it means I'm sort of inspiring other people to kind of think about it. And there's so many things that we can do. There's a lot bigger things where you may need developer input, but actually there's quite a lot, as I mentioned earlier, that businesses can do to help in the short term themselves as well, if they're uploading content, or think about creating new landing pages, like think about how they were put together, especially when you're looking at sort of mobile phone. Is there ways that we can kind of make it less daunting, so you're not scrolling forever and ever? Can we put things in scrolling, scroll bars? The big thing I see quite a lot is it's great to have like reviews on your website, but if you've got a lot of like fast moving elements such as like sliders, if you're using animations to slide content in and out, that can be really overwhelming. So trying to explain to people the benefit, even though it kind of it was kind of a trend at a point. Now actually moving away and actually just putting the content in front of people in a way that's digestible and nicely designed is what we need to do. So yeah.
Thank you. The sliders do my head in. And I mean, I want to watch a video, but I want to see the image and I want to choose whether or not I click through. Being that I've got dyspraxia, I can get overwhelmed, and that's me bouncing. I am gone. You know, that information overload can be too much. And I love the fact that you just talked about designing for everybody, because as somebody who has neurodivergence, and it's been really interesting, my journey recently, because I didn't realize how much I design for that as well. So thank you so much for sharing that. I want to know about Lee, because you do some really cool stuff in your own time, don't you? You've got something major coming up.
Yeah, so in my spare time, I've always, as mentioned, like I like being creative, and the other part of my passion outside of that is actually going out and exploring places. So as part of that, about 8 years ago, when I started my previous agency job, I got a place at the Oxford Half. Back then, I was not a keen runner at all. Back at school, I was picked for the 800 meters because I was probably the slowest there. But actually, that developed a passion, and over time, I joined my local running club, Whitney Road Runners, which is an amazing thing, which I'm now part of and helping shape with the local community, which is awesome. But for my next big kind of challenge outside of work is training for my 4th marathon in October, the Chester Marathon, which is going to be awesome. So yeah, I love a big challenge. Like pushing myself a little bit out of my comfort zone, which is why I'm here today as well. Because yeah, I really want to kind of find out a bit more about myself. I think when you put yourself through these challenges, you learn about how you adapt to them. And people say to me all the time, like, how do you run for so long? And in the end, you like I said, I just mentioned, like you learn so much about yourself and how much you can help with like resilience and things like that. And that's something I'm trying to bring across to my business really. Is there are going to be some great days where you're really high, and there's going to be other days where like you're not. And I think that's where I'm doing my running. I can kind of relate to it as well. So yeah, I'm
And
really looking forward to kind of getting started. So yeah, this week is the first week of training. So yeah, quite a way off the long 20-mile runs, but we'll get there. Build
I
slowly.
want, honestly, I want to applaud you, not just for doing the marathon running, but also for joining me today, because I remember mentioning this to you when I first met you, and you just went white. In fact, I think you went green at the idea of going live on a Friday morning with me. And I was like, but it's personal branding. People will get to know you, the
Yeah.
person behind the brand. And you were just like, no way. And it took us a bit of time to get together to have a coffee. And then over that coffee, I don't know quite how I managed to convince you, but I did. And I'm really pleased that you have joined us. We've had a couple of comments. I'm just going to go to Luke. I've known and this is lovely from Luke. This is one of the nice things I love about going live, and I've just got goosebumps, okay? Luke has just said, I've known and worked with Lee for many years, a chop chap and a very talented and and I'm not dyslexic, right? And very talented in web design. Thank you, Luke. That is just the nicest thing I think I've ever had on the Wise Why, is where somebody has said how great my guest is. So thank you. Lee, what's next? What are you going to do next? What's your next challenge? You've done the you're doing a marathon. You've set up a business. Setting up a business is, it's not easy.
Yeah.
So what's next for you?
I think the next thing for me really is, as I mentioned, I love being able to kind of educate and mentor, and that's the thing I really like. So I think the next couple of years I'd like to try and work on doing more public speaking. So maybe that's going to speak at a conference. So maybe at the moment it's actually the WordPress conference in Italy at the moment. So I think my long term really is to kind of keep pushing myself out of my comfort zone, and yeah, look at maybe doing one of those things. So kind of outside of my business, I do run the WordPress Oxford meetup, and that's kind of my initial kind of stepping stone to kind of push myself out and be that kind of organizer and key speaker. So yeah, that's my aim really. I think is obviously to keep growing my business, support side websites, but also yeah, look at maybe doing a bit more training as well. That's
Love
kind
it.
of how I'm going to kind of move forward.
So Haley's just joined us and she said, wow to the marathon challenge. And I'd never have guessed you weren't a podcast regular. You see, everyone's coming for you this morning. It's
Oh,
brilliant.
thanks very much.
You see, welcome to the Wise Why, where we take newbies who've never been on a podcast before, and I make sure that even before we go in the studio, you actually have stepped into your presenter zone. This is where the tables
Yeah.
turn. Now, this is always an interesting point because it could make us go off on a tangent. I have no idea. So this is where you get to ask a question to me.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so as I just mentioned there, obviously I talked about public speaking, and obviously we've had quite a lot of talks about talking on camera and things like that. How have you got any kind of tips on helping me kind of get to that position where I can kind of go to those big conferences? I appreciate this is quite a large question, but is there any like tips you could offer me to kind of help me push myself out of that concern a little bit, and kind of any pointers to kind of help me shape that talk?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing we have to do is learn how to step in. I call it presenter shoes. Now, this is a very simple acting technique, and I'm going to talk. It's really interesting because every Friday I go live when it's term time. Every Friday, and every Friday I say, now this is a really bad thing to admit, but every Friday I always say to myself, today is the day that I'm going to spend the time to get myself ready, and I'm not going to do any work beforehand. I'm going to prepare. Now, my preparation takes half an hour. Now, my preparation is actually based off being an actor going on stage. And I have tried to do 45 minutes and I have tried to do anything else, but it's half an hour. And the reason for it is you have the 35-minute call. So if you start preparing too early, so when you're going on stage, I'll just explain about the 35-minute call. The 35-minute call is where an actor prepares before they go on stage. We go and arrive at the theatre. We have to sign in. We have to do our makeup. We have to style ourselves. We have to get into our costume. And then 35 minutes later, it's called the half-hour call. So 30 minutes later, you're called beginners to the stage. And then you're in the wings getting yourself ready. Now, those last 5 minutes are really important. But that 30-minute before those last 5 minutes is where you prepare. And a lot of people over prepare. Now, if you remember, I know you quite well, I didn't send you the questions that we were potentially going to discuss until this morning. There is a moment of knowing your script, knowing what you're going to say. And I'm going to say, you know you do you, and you do you better than anybody else. And nobody knows what you're going to say anyway. So stop trying to learn a script. The minute you start to learn a script is the minute you're going to start tripping yourselves up. You haven't spent years like me being an actor training on how to learn a script. So why now are you going to start putting pressure on yourself to learn a script? So the first thing we do is we take the script and we rip it up. Okay. So we absolutely think about ripping the script up and throwing it in the bin. We no longer need it. We don't need that crutch, because what we're going to do is we're going to take pictures and we're going to visualize pictures. So if you're doing a PowerPoint, you put a picture that is relevant to what you're talking about. We don't overload our PowerPoint with lots of text. We put a picture in. The picture is the clue. We think in pictures because actually we remember everything that happens to us as pictures. So when we're walking down the street, now it's much harder if you are blind, and I do have techniques for people who are visually challenged. There are lots of different things, whether it's auditory, we have got lots of different ways of doing it. So please, at the moment, I'm only talking about people who are not visually impaired. But for the non-visually impaired, even actually for people who are visually impaired, actually, it's about remembering the picture, painting a picture. So you take a picture that you see, and it's your visual clue. And you place those either in your PowerPoint or in your mind, like a structure that you follow. And if you follow them as a picture, what's beautiful is you haven't put them in an order. So if you don't put them in an order, you've not got pressure to follow a script. So again, we get rid of that. So what we're doing now is we're creating up and freeing up that process of presenting. And so the whole idea is that we see it as a myriad of pictures, like a collage. And we know that we want to touch these points, but we're not going to put pressure on ourselves of which order we're going to put them in. Because if we miss one out, we can always go, oh, I forgot to mention. The other thing that we don't do is we don't worry about umming and ahhing. We don't worry about stumbling over our words. I started the podcast and I stumbled. Did I go, oh, no, I go, I own that. I made a mistake. It doesn't matter. That's the human element. So instead of putting all this pressure on ourselves, we actually lift the pressure. But all of this starts with breathing. And in the last 5 minutes before you go on stage, what did I say to you in the studio? I said, lift yourself up, create space for your breathing, your belly breath. Your voice cannot come out if you're not breathing properly. If you don't have, and I've done a whole video on this on YouTube, you can go and check it. If you are not using your breath to support your voice will not work. Your voice will get tighter and tighter and tighter. If you're a woman, your voice will go higher. If you're a man, your voice will get deeper, but ultimately you will get dry. So we look at our breathing. We look at how we're standing. We lock our legs and we're leaning forward or we're leaning back. We're then leaning into the audience. So there's lots of different things that we can do, but actually we have to relax our legs. We need to keep our hips, then forget the power pose. We need to keep our feet on terra firma. We need to keep them rooted. We need to keep our knees relaxed. We need to keep our feet under our hips. It's really simple. And when it comes to moving, and a lot of people ask me about movement, you move on a thought. So as you're thinking your next thought, that's when you move, because actually the thought creates the movement. Otherwise, you're just moving and moving and moving. You end up pacing. So you move on a thought. So the next time you want to move to something, you then talk and you don't worry about gestures. I could go on for hours. This is what I talk about. This is what I do. And every single person, wrapping it all up, is unique. And every single person who comes to work with me, I make sure I keep that uniqueness. One of the really things I don't want is to create a public speaker or a presenter on camera who is a mirror of me, because that's not real. You are you, you do you, and you do you better than anybody else. I hope that was good enough and gave you some advice.
Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, so I've tried to do some practice recordings on my phone, and I end up becoming quite animated in my hands. And I'm like trying to stop doing that. It's a comfort thing.
Right. So don't stop doing it. Just don't do this. So if you think about on camera, if you look at what I'm doing, I'm keeping I'm using my hands. So we've got a shot. So let's just talk camera quickly before we finish. You have a shot size. So if you're out here, you can see what's wrong. So if you were to do that movement here, you would do it like that. You would try and keep it. Let's get myself into a position. So you would do it like this. But if you do this, you're breaking the fourth wall. And when you break the fourth wall, you're then coming through the screen, and actually you're then jumping into people. It's the same as when you lift your voice and you scream down the microphone. You're jumping into someone's living room. The fourth wall is known as the TV. So when you go on camera, you're now like a TV presenter. You're in someone's home. You're in someone's hand. You don't need to shout at them. You need to invite them in. There's nothing wrong with using movement. Just don't do this and break the fourth wall. Does that make sense?
No, good. Lots take on board for that, Q.
I told you it would take us somewhere. So
that was fun. I love it.
Yeah. So Peter Mawson's joined us, and it's been an interesting discussion. And Luke's come back and said, having done a couple of public talks myself, the advice is spot on. Thank you, because I'm live. I could get it completely wrong. It's about telling compelling stories. It is. And if you are struggling on how to tell a story, if you go to my website, you can read the blog on storytelling, because I've got all of this on my website, funnily enough. And I use Stanislavski's 7 questions. It's the 7 questions an actor uses to prepare themselves by exploring the subtext of a character. It's also the same structure we use when we're storytelling. And it's also, wait for this, the same structure we do when we write our posts and our copy for social media. So go steal it for free. So compelling stories, which are far better to do from visual stimulation over fixed text, heavy slides. Yeah, we don't want to overpower our audience. Thank you, Luke. I appreciate that. Lee, how would you like to finish off your episode? Is there a nugget of wisdom you would love to share?
Yeah, I think I just want to kind of end the podcast with just one bit of big advice that I've kind of thread through the whole podcast, really, is that before you kind of think about how it's going to look, really just trying to understand your customer rather than trying to build a website for yourself. You're always thinking about the other person. So think about the different audiences you have. So spend time, and it may mean it takes you longer to get to the website building process, but actually by putting that time in the early stages, it means that in the future you can then grow a lot faster because you've already put those foundations in place. So yeah, really planning is key. Consistency, like social media, consistency is key. So keep on top of your website. It's important.
Thank you so much
Thank you very
for
much.
being brave this morning. It's been an absolute hoot. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.